I'm Chris on Chris on Tour, and today I'm going to talk about long-term travel cost. I've been traveling around the world for a bit more than 3 years, and I made it to 107 countries as of now. And one of the most asked questions when I'm traveling is, how can you afford it? And how do you do it? I think overall, it is a misconception that traveling around the world is only something that rich people can do. If you're following a few guidelines and if you can say no to certain things, then I think everybody with a bit of savings can travel around full time. You don't necessarily have to go to the expensive countries, and you could start in the areas that require a bit less budgets. All of that I'm gonna discuss today. I have a massive Excel sheet which I use to track all of my expenses from the last 94 countries. I haven't done it in the very beginning, but quite early on from 2014 I started to track everything when I started my first round the world trip. And today I'm going to show you how much I spent and how I tracked it. And I will also tell you a little bit about how you can do it yourself and how you can keep your travel costs low. So hopefully that's interesting for you, and let's just jump straight in, I guess. I've got this little infographic here. Long-term travel costs. What does it cost to travel around the world per year? And I've just updated this today. This is the 4th or 5th time I'm doing these. And right now I have all of the current data from my recent trips to Nepal, Montenegro, Greece, and so on. It's all included now. So overall, if we zoom in a bit here, I started my first trip around the world on the 30th of September 2014. Then I traveled for 3 years in one go. I had a bit of a break in between, came back to London, spent some time at home as well. And now I just finished my recent trip in the Montenegro area in the Balkans. So all of these days here, the 1,317 days or 3.61 years, those are the actual traveling days. So I excluded all the time that I spent at home, either in London or in Germany. And in total it's a bit more than 43 months. So it's still quite a lot of data. And as I said, I've been tracking the last 94 countries. So I had around 10 countries that I visited before, and I didn't really track any data there yet. And I've pretty much been to all of the continents. The only one trip that I excluded from the data that I'm going to show you today is the trip to Antarctica, because Antarctica is a really, really expensive trip for a short amount of time. And it would have I think my daily and monthly and yearly spendings would have been higher, obviously, if I had a trip that cost 6,000 euros or $6,000 rather. And then the daily average will be just way higher. So I decided to remove the Antarctica trip, but that's the only thing that I removed. Everything else is in here. And we're getting straight to the answer of the question, how much does it cost to travel around the world, or long-term travel costs? Per day, I spent 22.87 euros, per month around 700 euros, and per year 8,354 0.51 euros. So that's the big figure. A bit over 8,000 euros. That's what it cost me personally to travel around the world, including all the food, including the accommodation, book trips, and all the other expenses that I had on the trip. I'm going to talk a bit more about what I tracked and how I tracked in a bit. I have a massive Excel sheet that I use for that. But let's talk about the fact that it can stay pretty low, the spending. So you have a way to travel around for cheap. And what I personally did does not necessarily have to apply to everybody else. Everyone has their own style of traveling. Some prefer to stay in hotels. Obviously, they won't travel for 8,000 euros a year. That's just simply impossible. For me, I was staying mostly with couchsurfers. Couchsurfing is a website where you meet up with strangers and you stay in their house, and in return you do the same. You host other strangers in your house. And all of this is happening without any exchange of money. Usually you would just cook for your hosts just to show your appreciation. And the main important thing for me personally to use couchsurfing was to actually meet the people, because you meet the most amazing people. And a little side effect is that you also save some money. So I used a lot of couchsurfing, and I also was doing a lot of hiking and trekking in the mountains. So I was staying in my tent, and it was just every now and then kind of in between locations when I'm traveling from one area to the other. You usually have to stay in a town. I don't like cities so much, but if I have to stay in the town, I would most likely stay with a couchsurfer there. Every now and then, maybe I would go in a hotel or a hostel as well. But generally, I kept these costs quite low. So you can actually see in the breakdown here, accommodation just accounts for 2,600 euros. So my main spendings have been on transport. Obviously, flights can be very expensive, especially if you get a situation where you have to book a flight on short notice. Those can be quite expensive. Food, obviously, you have to eat and drink, and book trips, those include stuff like, let's say, a guided trek to Kilimanjaro, something like that. Even though that was before 2014, so that's actually not in here as well. And then the rest pretty much accounts for anything other than these four categories. So if I would have to get a haircut, if I have to buy new batteries, all of that will go into rest. And we're going to talk about all these numbers in a little bit. But before we jump into the Excel sheet, I just want to spend some more time about the question, how can you actually afford? On my website, Chris on Tour, it's not that active anymore. I'm kind of focusing on YouTube nowadays. But I still have a few articles on my website that might be interesting for you. So if you go on chrisontour84.de and you click on budget travel, you have a few different sections here. And those are the ways how I kept my travel costs low. So I was doing a lot of hitchhiking, not taking buses or trains. In some countries, they can be very expensive. So it's a good way to save money. It's a bit more for the adventurous type of traveler. I also hear a lot of female travelers saying that they are afraid to hitchhike alone. I agree that as a guy, it's a bit easier. You don't have to worry as much as a girl, but I also know a lot of girls that are traveling around the world just using hitchhiking. I've got an article here about how to keep your travel costs low. So this is just giving you 10 different tips on how to keep the cost low. So you have stay with the local couch surfers, avoid taxis, avoid the restaurants. There's a bunch of stuff. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but if you're interested, feel free to read up on that. And I have another article about another couch surfing one. Is not yet ready, but the how to find cheap flights article might also be interesting for you. I'm just giving my best tips on how to find cheap flights. I actually also have a video on that. I'm going to link it to you in the top right corner if you want to check that out after this video. As I mentioned, I don't want to spend so much time on actual how you're gonna do it. This video is about long-term travel costs. So I'm actually showing you the actual cost that I had. And most importantly, I'm going to show you how I tracked everything. So this might seem a little bit overwhelming at first when I show you this Excel sheet now. But I have this sheet for a very long time and it's all based on formulas. So it's actually not as much work as you would think. Because if you scroll down, you will see there's a lot of data in here. But you have to imagine I started from zero at some point and then the sheet was kind of empty. So let me just zoom in a little bit and show you exactly how I track it. So on the left side, I have the date, the day, the continent, the country, then the city that I visited, and under info, I just put whatever I was doing there. Or maybe in here, I put like what time the ferry is leaving. So this is information that I can actually use when I'm traveling. In the beginning, I didn't fill this out too much. If we scroll down, you will notice that I filled this out more and more. So it pretty much says, okay, here I was in Africa Burn. That's a festival in Cape Town or near Cape Town. So these kind of days were occupied with the festival. And now I know exactly, I've been there from the 27th of April to the 2nd of May 2016. So it really helps me to go back in time and figure out what the heck I was doing on all my travels. Or let's say I went to Susufle and I forgot the name of the dune that we were seeing there. And then I can go in here and I just have all of this information nicely archived pretty much. And while it looks like a lot right now, it is actually not that much time effort if you kind of update it day by day. So it would just take me like 1 minute to update this and just write whatever I was doing this day in here. And then that's it. But that's not everything, obviously. So if we are scrolling here to the right, I have another column for flight numbers. So I can retrack all of my flight numbers actually and all of my reservation numbers. So you see the booking codes from the airline here. I know when the plane departs and when it arrives. So that's more useful for the things in the future, obviously. Now, I don't really need that information anymore. But I also, the most important part here is the orange highlighted part where I track all of my expenses. So in the beginning, I told you I break it down by transportation, and then we have food, accommodation, book trips, and rest. So here I know I paid 172 euros for this flight. Then I spent €8.80 on food. If there's zero, that means that I probably had enough food from the day before. Or maybe here, 27, probably I went to a supermarket and I bought a lot of food. So it often happens that I have a higher spending on one day and then a lower spending on the next day. And as you can see, basically not a lot of accommodation costs. Okay, there's some stuff here. What happened here? Let's see. I was traveling around India and I was climbing some mountains. Maybe there were no couch surfers around. So every now and then I would have accommodation costs. It's not like I'm not spending any money at all on accommodation. Then we have the book trip and rest. And a little sum here. So as you can see, it's all calculating these three together as a sum. And then in the very top, if we scroll up all the way to the beginning, I have these averages here as well. So we have the complete cost and then an average as well and a percentage of how these 5 columns are adding up. Transportation, food, accommodation, book trips, rest. And the interesting part is over here on this side, where it shows me exactly how many days I've been traveling. As I said, all of the days at home are excluded from there and how much I spent. And then it's divided into months and years as well. So this is generally how I track it. I have some more stuff in this Excel sheet, like in the blue corner here, I put my couch surfing information. So I have everything in this sheet pretty much. There's also more tabs down here, that I use, but I don't want to focus on that. So the Excel sheet is not only the cost tracking, there's even more to it. But in this video, I just want to focus on the cost of the traveling. And right here, I have an interactive, everything is based on formulas. So I split it down by region and by country. So I can kind of see which country has been the most expensive in terms of food. So when I compare these countries and regions, I only compare food. Because a lot of the times I don't have any accommodation costs at all or very low transportation costs, but I always have to eat. So that's a figure that I can compare throughout the regions and the countries. And you can see the formulas is in German, but it pretty much tells me that this number is just counting up if it sees North America within this C column. And so this is all happening automatically, luckily, thanks to Excel. And then the food as well. It only counts if it's Europe, if it says Europe. And similar to that, for the countries down here, it's the same, but instead of instead of the region, I would have the name of the country in here. So here it tells me, okay, I counted 46 days of Canada. I counted that you spent 588 euros in these 46 days, so it's 12.80 euro per day. And generally, I always try to keep the costs low. I was traveling on a budget, so not necessarily because I didn't have the money, but I didn't want to spend the money because right now I'm actually here in Montenegro and I'm creating my own business. I'm going to open a co-working space and a restaurant and a bar with a pool, with a gym. So I kind of saved money all my life for this moment, and now I'm spending it all. If you want to find out more about that project, the Montenegro Tower, I'm going to link it to you in the top right corner as well. But back then when I was traveling around the world, kind of backpacking style, I was really trying to keep the travel costs low. So that means no fancy restaurants, eat the street food that can be really cheap in some places, go to the supermarket and cook yourself. If you travel with others, that actually helps even more because you can get food together and share the cost and then just cook together. So I was doing that quite a lot. And that's why these food costs generally are pretty low. And the most interesting part is to see which one is the most expensive one and which one is the cheapest. One thing to notice that I excluded everything that has less than 10 days. So Sri Lanka with 10 days is kind of the country, and then Taiwan with 10 days. I had a lot of other countries, but I didn't spend more than 10 days in there. So that's why they're excluded here. And the cheapest of all of them, for me personally, was Myanmar, Burma, followed up by Vietnam and Indonesia. So you can see that Southeast Asia has been the cheapest for me. And then we have Canada, Faroe Islands, the UK, New Zealand, Caribbean, US, Norway. So all of these are on the top. The United States figure is quite high because I spent a lot of time in the US. Probably 4 or 5 trips. And most recently, I was also hiking the Pacific Crest Trail there. Again, if you want to check out these videos, I'm going to link it as well in the top right corner. We have a lot of, I think 15 videos in total from my hike there. It's been 1,000 kilometers in a bit more than a month. And yeah, I had to kind of buy a lot of food in relatively expensive supermarkets there because you don't really have a lot of options. But those are the countries, yeah, so this is the way how I kind of calculate and compare the countries to one each other. And yeah, this Excel sheet is really helping me out a lot. And if you scroll down, you can see it's a lot. Every now and then I have these parts here, and this is kind of just when I went home a few days. And if I would be home like for a longer period of time, then I would remove the columns entirely, because I'm not tracking my overall spendings here. I'm just tracking my travel spendings. Yeah, and it's just a huge Excel sheet. Here we had 3 months of Australia, New Zealand, and it goes on and on and on. And at some point, here's the Pacific Crest Trail. It also helps me to track exactly how long I spent in different hiking sections. So I really, really love my little Excel sheet here. And now we're here in Montenegro. So just coming back from Nepal, spent Christmas at home. As you can see here, I just have the Christmas Eve in here just to remember, Nepal was just before Christmas. So it kind of gives me a helping hand to figure out where I've been. And yeah, now I'm here in the Montenegro Tower. We've cleaned up the garden. First step, the first week is over. This will probably take the whole year, the construction of the tower. But yeah, that's pretty much it, actually. I wanted to keep it as short as possible as I can. And I hope that it helps you a little bit to give you some insights on how I personally track my expenses. Again, it's not something for everyone. I know I'm German. I'm kind of organized. I love to plan, even though I'm planning a lot, my trips will most likely turn out quite spontaneous. So half of the things that I plan in advance on my little sheet here, I'm not really seeing in the end, because then I kind of go with the flow. But I just love the excitement of planning new things and figuring out what's around, and then I find these amazing places. Others might not really track the expenses at all. They don't really care at all how much they spend. But since I had my blog running in the past, it was always something that the people like to read about the most and see which countries have been the cheapest for me. Maybe they use it for their own trip planning as well. If they want to go to a cheap country, maybe they will check out Myanmar, because that was actually really, really cheap. Like just below €3 for all the meals in the day. It's kind of crazy. You also have to consider that times change. So if I traveled to a country 8 years ago, it might have changed now. So it could be more expensive. It could be cheaper. You don't really know. So these are just like kind of the things that happened at the time of my traveling. But all in all, I think the main message here of this video is that traveling does not have to be expensive. If you use couchsurfing, maybe you hitchhike a little bit, don't go to the fancy restaurants. You can keep your travel costs low, and you don't have to travel for 3 years either. It could also just be 6 months. So you don't have to spend your life savings on traveling. It obviously helps if you have some money saved up. Where there's a way, there's a will. Is that how the saying is going? I'm not sure in English exactly, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about long-term travel cost at all, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I will try to answer all the questions that come in. And if you have no questions, then why don't you watch some more videos? I already linked quite a few here in the video. And next up will actually be my Nepal series. I can't wait to release the Nepal series because it's going to be amazing. And yeah, also quite a lot of footage. And after Nepal series, I'm going to upload my Montenegro Tower documentary. I'm already recording the whole process here. And hopefully it will be a really nice way of seeing how everything looked before and in the end. And yeah, in the future, from late summer this year, maybe you can already come by to Montenegro and say hi in person. Or maybe you need a co-working space and you just look for a country anywhere in the world that's cheap, where you have a nice beach access and some mountains. All of that will be available in the Montenegro Tower. And yeah, I can't wait to open it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Bye-bye. You made it to the end of the video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that like button as well. Leave me some feedback in the comments, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. A special shout out to my Patreon supporters as well. If you would like to find out how you can support me and receive monthly benefits such as receiving postcards from me or me being your own personal trip planner, then check out the link below.